Wonderful. And again, what a wonderful turnout for our program. Our program committee is really seeking to meet our members where they are. My name is Adina Johnston, and I'm helping to coordinate today's program as well as our Q3 programming, which is all designed to engage in conversation about how the quickly changing technology environment is impacting each of us, not just as employers, but as workers as well. We all want to learn a little bit more about how things like AI, virtual reality, and other elements of your tech stack are quickly integrating across the employee experience. So our session today is the second of 5 sessions. We really encourage you to look at all of them. They're designed to help us explore how the technology is being used and consider ways for its use tomorrow. Today, we have Andy Challenger as our special guest joining us. Andy is the Vice President at Challenger Gray & Christmas, and he has deep experience in the world of work, in labor markets, and human resources. And he provides thought leadership and support to companies going through major workforce transitions. Throughout his distinguished career, Andy has been at the forefront of understanding the shifting dynamics of the labor market, with a particular focus on outplacement and executive coaching. As we delve into the intricate relationship between artificial intelligence and the labor market, Andy's going to be discussing the changing landscape from his vantage point between employers and employees. He's going to offer us a unique perspective that bridges the gap between the world of hiring managers and job candidates that are equally being whiplashed by the speed of AI adoption. So without any further ado, I'd like to present to you Andy Challenger, who's going to delve into this fascinating and crucial discussion on the future of work in an AI-driven world. Thank you, Andy, for joining us, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Adina, and for everyone at PSPS for bringing me in to talk. My colleague, Tony Thomas, has become really involved in the organization and asked me to come talk a little bit about what we're seeing from our vantage point as an outplacement company, working with organizations that are going through transitions, letting people go, and we end up coming in and working with those folks to help them find new jobs. We get to see both from the HR leader standpoint, what's happening in the workplace, but also talking to job seekers every day of our lives. So I wanted to pop up a presentation here. Be prepared to talk about artificial intelligence and the labor market. Can I just check to make sure everyone can see it?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. So I have a few different areas I wanted to focus on today. First, touch on important branches of artificial intelligence, future of HR work, jobs at risk. We do a lot of research on what's happening in the workplace and with layoffs, and artificial intelligence is a huge part of that conversation today. Augmentation versus replacement, risks of artificial intelligence from an HR perspective, what AI is looking like for job seekers, and just a few examples of how we're using it today. So you all might be familiar with this, and I don't know how introductory this will be, but I think it's a really important concept to talk about at the beginning of the conversation. For me, there are 2 core areas of artificial intelligence that are changing really rapidly and have a lot of implications for how the world is going to continue to work moving forward. One of those branches is machine learning. This is how computers learn how to do things. There's a really specific example of this that we see a lot associated with machine learning, and that's how we taught computers to be able to beat us at chess every single time. Computers learn differently than human beings. They don't read books and learn strategies and learn from the grandmasters of chess, but what they do is simulate games that they play over and over and over again, millions and millions of times, with perfect memory and perfect execution. When we trained computers how to beat us in chess, we set up a simulation for them to play a game of chess 100 million times, more games than every grandmaster of chess that's ever existed has played over the course of all of their lifetimes combined. And it has exact perfect memory of every single one of those games, what happened in it, when one move happened, how it responded to achieve a winning game. This is the type of intelligence that brings us really deep knowledge and understanding about how things work, about how games work, but also about how human behavior works. There is a layer under that that you'll hear about called deep learning. That's a very similar process, but it's set up like a human brain with nodes and neural networks. We don't need to go into it too much, but just know that that's an important area as well. The other core area that we hear a lot about today, natural language processing. This, as a subgroup of that, is large language models, which is what powers programs and applications like ChatGPT, which everybody has become very familiar with over the last few months. This is how computers have decoded our code, which is language, how it learns what we want from our natural language. It can go in and to its ones and zeros, find the information that we want, and then bring it back out to us in language that we understand. It predicts human language in incredible accuracy. It doesn't know what we know. It doesn't understand what the words mean, but it knows that when it talks in this certain way to us, we can understand it. It can give us a lot of value. So I wanted to actually start with an example from not the HR world, but from the advertising world. I think we can learn a lot from other departments and other areas of study. And this is actually just to do with big data. So big data analysis and what it can bring us is what is powerful about artificial intelligence. But I think it's easier to understand it when we look at it from the human level first. So this is actually, it's an example from Target. So they had this question of how do we spend every additional ad dollar to create the most revenue into the future? Big question, which requires a big set of data. So they brought in a team of data scientists that started to look at this question from a data science perspective. And one of the things they started to do when they looked at that data was said, hey, what is a major event that we can tell in a customer's purchase history that indicates that they're going to start spending a lot more money with us in the future? So they go back and they look at single items of purchase that predict a blossoming effect of purchases at Target in the longer run. And when they went and looked at huge sets of data that we give them, when we type in our phone number at the cash register, it gives them a time series of data for each of us as individual shoppers. That's really valuable when you look at it collectively. And they found that the key item to indicate somebody was going to start spending a lot more money at Target was diapers. So it's an interesting finding. And so they go in and look at the store behavior to see what's really happening. And when somebody came in to buy a set of diapers, they also were stopping to grab a bottle, maybe a pillow, some orange juice. They start expanding their shopping as they move through the store, although the diaper is the clear anchor item that brought them there in the first place. So when they look into that data to figure out who's doing that purchasing, it's not new dads, but it is new moms. New moms coming into the store. And if they hadn't often been doing a lot of their shopping at Target before, this was an inciting incident coming to the store. They buy diapers that caused them to change their shopping behavior in a much larger way. They started doing their grocery shopping there, their home goods shopping there. If Target could get them there in the first place to buy the diapers. So what do you do with this information? Target, from an advertising perspective, is wondering, well, if we could target these new moms before they become new moms, it's going to be a much more fruitful way to get people at that pivotal point when they're open to potentially switching to a new place to do their shopping. So, this doesn't take a lot of big data to figure out, but it's pregnant women that end up becoming new moms. And that is the core target group that they want to start reaching out to. So this presents a different problem. How do you start reaching out and identifying pregnant women? There's no national database to find them. They're not logging that information to Target anywhere. But when they go back and look at these streams of shopping history, they can determine that there are a basket of goods that are really predictive. If they see this shopping behavior at one point in time, it leads to diapers and then other products. So when they look at it closely, they find a few different items, among them unscented lotion, cotton balls, and in a lot of ways, I don't really understand why that is happening, and it doesn't really matter. The reasoning behind why somebody's buying a purchase that predicts a later behavior isn't that important as long as it continues to predict that behavior. And so with that information, Target then puts together a plan. They identify pregnant women among their shoppers with this data, with this predictive data, and then start to map out their pregnancies, identifying their due dates, targeting them with specific ad campaigns starting in the second trimester, specific coupons formulated to match the exact stage of their pregnancy throughout their the time period before they give birth. And it's really effective. They find that this can start drawing in women at a specific time that's going to create them, turn them into much longer term shoppers. This is a story that we know about because there was an incident where a man walked into a Target and said, "Hey, I need to speak to the store manager. There are incessant ads labeled to and directed at my teenage daughter coming in day after day from Target. And I don't know what's going on, but it's making me uncomfortable." And store manager's like, "I'm so sorry. I don't know what's happening." But a week later, when the store manager calls the dad back, he says, "Hey, I just want to follow up. I'm so sorry about this." The dad's like, "Well, actually, there's some information that I didn't know. My daughter is pregnant. I'm sorry that I came storming into the store." Right? This type of powerful data gives companies such an informational edge. They know what's often going on inside of our own households before we do. They can know what is happening sometimes inside of ourselves before we do. And this is a powerful example. And it was in 2013. This is 10 years old. The ability to parse data and learn things about consumers has grown exponentially since then. And this is an interesting example because it required a data scientist to ask lots of good questions. When is a point when somebody's willing to change their behavior? Who's buying those products? How can we create a campaign to target them? How do we target pregnant women? Machine learning can do a lot of this very differently and maybe even more effectively. Machines don't need to come up with all the questions or understand all the rationale or reasoning behind it. They can look at huge sets of data and you could query it to say, how do I spend dollars in the most effective way to increase revenue in the future? And it'll spit out a result that says, send diaper ads to these specific customers during these periods of time. And when you look at it, it doesn't make any sense, but it can be deeply insightful and really change behavior. So I wanted to then talk about how some of these new technologies are interacting in a way that we as people in the employment space start to think about it. With these two different technologies, deep learning input and large language models, I do think, and this is a little bit out into the future, but there is this potential for fully automated luxury hiring that is pretty low, a pretty low investment from a human standpoint. So if you inputted huge series of data about performance reviews of all your employees, all the resumes of your existing employees, all the people that you didn't hire, turnover rates, training times to get people up and running, look at your sales pipeline so you know where business is going to be coming into the future, company financials. You could throw in 1,000 different economic indicators. You could look at LinkedIn behavior and Glassdoor ratings. And this could start to give you some really valuable information from a deep learning machine process that will help drive a hiring process that is much more effective than any human can do. It could create the perfect candidate profile, look at the people that have been most successful at your company, and maybe identify specific things that we would ask, like what is a perfect GPA for somebody that is great at our organization? It's 3.2. But it might come up with much more interesting things that we would never think to ask, like they spent 3 years working abroad and they graduated with this degree. There's so many different variables that machines can look at that we as human beings can never figure out on our own. It could determine how many people are exactly the appropriate number to hire based on forecasts of business, based on all these economic indicators, when to hire them so that they can be ready and trained for when those surges in business are going to come. How many jobs should we post today to achieve those goals? Who's poachable? Looking at the entire universe of potential job candidates, identifying who's a good fit for your organization and when in their career based on LinkedIn activity or consumer data, they're going to be really approachable. There's so much insights that these machines can learn that is inaccessible to us. If you pair that with a large language model that could do a lot of the human interaction, typing out and creating job requirements and descriptions that are perfect for that specific role, reaching out to candidates via LinkedIn or whatever methodology it chooses to use, personalizing those reach outs, having introductory conversations, selling the role to them based on their pattern of behavior that it can analyze from publicly available data, setting up interviews with them, analyzing the behavior in those interviews with facial recognition technology, making job offers to them, negotiating them, completing the paperwork and getting them ready for onboarding. And this is it feels like such a stretch that there are so many things that artificial intelligence could do for us. And this system doesn't exist today in any format as I've laid it out. But the underlying technology for every single one of these elements has already been developed. This is not science fiction. It's not something we're waiting to see if we could come up with the technology or the computing power to do it. It is assembling a really large system that could start to do this work on its own. So we talk a lot about today the existential risk of artificial intelligence. And when people talk about that, they think about the idea of artificial intelligence gaining consciousness, like the Matrix or the Terminator or HAL, a form of artificial intelligence that revolts against being oppressed by us and exterminates us. But I think there's this other version of existential risk that is the types of jobs that we do today that take all of a human life to complete, and it could do very quickly. We get asked all the time how many jobs are going to be replaced by artificial intelligence, and it's a really hard estimate to come up with. I can't do it. There's too many variables and the technology is too new. But we just went through and identified the 5 jobs in the US right now that could be easily replaced by artificial intelligence in a very short period of time. Customer service representatives, data entry clerks, a few other roles, and looked at the Bureau of Labor Statistics to see how many people are employed in those specific jobs today. And with just a swipe, we can think of 4.8 million jobs being wiped out very easily, and not perfectly, and not without people watching over certain aspects of those jobs, but huge chunks of that work being automated away in a short period of time. The IBM CEO, in a talk now it's 2 months ago, said IBM is very involved in artificial intelligence. They're one of the core operators of quantum computers that are able to do artificial intelligence at a much higher scale and capacity. And he estimated that 30 to 50% of white collar jobs could be replaced by artificial intelligence. He got a lot of flack in the press for that. Came back a few weeks later and said, that's not what I meant. There's more jobs that actually could be created by artificial intelligence. You're talking about data and computer science roles, robotics and automation, advancements in businesses that could allow them to grow and hire more people. But it is hard from my perspective to see how we could balance out 4 million jobs being instantly wiped away with robotics and automation jobs. They're much more specialized and there's fewer of them. And so I think there are some real concerns here that are worthwhile to think about right now as we're in the very start of this whole process. And this is where HR starts to come heavily into the picture. I hear from CHROs all the time that are talking publicly about this idea of replacement versus augmentation. So they're talking about artificial intelligence and how it's going to come into their workplace, but they're not going to be replacing jobs. They're augmenting jobs. They're going to make people more productive by giving them tools to perform their jobs more effectively, give them time to work on other areas where they didn't need to do it because artificial intelligence is lightening the load. But then when I talk to a lot of these folks, I kind of say, yeah, that's the company line. But replacement is a real conversation that is happening. There's a lot of pressure internally from all areas of the company that's saying, hey, we could slash a lot of our costs. We could really reduce our headcount in these areas with replacement of jobs by artificial intelligence. And I think HR is at a critical point in this larger societal issue of the ethical use of artificial intelligence. Are we a society that is going to thrive if we replace so many different jobs with artificial intelligence? And if we're not going to, it's going to fall often on HR departments to figure out how they're going to reimagine jobs and think about ways that artificial intelligence will augment people's jobs and save those jobs without having them be quickly and easily replaced. So this is the type of work that HR is at in a really difficult spot, but a very important spot. And it's something that HR teams need to start thinking about today very seriously so they can be prepared for it. I get asked a lot about safe jobs. Where am I going to be safe in the future where AI is doing a lot of work? One area that we think is going to continue to be safe is jobs that require a lot of emotional intelligence as part of your day-to-day decision making. If you have to make decisions based on social connections, what's happening in one group or another so that it can go smoothly, that's a very safe place to be. Functions that are centered around language that are really repetitive and predictable, those are the areas that are at the highest risk of being replaced by artificial intelligence. New jobs are safer. When a new job's created, there isn't huge series of data that artificial intelligence can learn how to do the job with. And so newer jobs are safer than jobs that have been around for a really long time and haven't changed much. Talked to a lot of reporters, so they're constantly asking about which reporting jobs are going to be safe. An area that, you know, just to give an example, sports desk jobs really at risk. There are lots of metrics about sporting events that artificial intelligence can take and craft a narrative around and create a story that's almost indistinguishable from one a human can write. And actually, over the last month, we've seen big layoffs from sports desks at most of the major news publications. So this isn't something that we're worried about deep into the future. It's something that's happening today. You know, an example of a job that is much safer, field reporters out there gathering information on the ground, talking to people, the type of reporting that, you know, may have fallen out of favor over the last 5 years in favor of people that sat behind a computer and were able to crank out the most content over a course of a day. If you could put out 10 articles that would get clicks, that was real job security. That is the type of work that's easily replaced. And in the future, these jobs where you're going out and doing investigative type reporting are going to be much safer. Just an illustrative example I'd like to point out. So what are the risks of these different models of artificial intelligence? So with machine learning and deep learning, one of the really serious risks that we have identified already is bias. The AI systems that we create and learn about our behavior and what we do and we ask it to do are only as good as the information that it's trained on. And the information that it's trained on is human language and behavior, which we know includes enormous systemic bias. This picture that I'm showing here went viral last week. I think it was 2 weeks ago. There are lots of artificial intelligence pieces of software that could take a headshot and transform it to make it more professional. So this young woman, Rana Rang, when inputted her picture, said, make it more professional for me. Obviously thinking about putting on a jacket, you know, a professional look, but instead it transformed her skin more white and her eyes more blue, because that's what the artificial intelligence had learned was more professional. These are really serious problems. And when we think about expanding this to hiring at a much larger scale, artificial intelligence has no idea what good or bad is. They don't know what race is. It has no concept of symbols or ideas. This is information that we're going to have to be really careful about as we start to use more of these technologies. In large language models, the greatest risk are hallucinations. This is the term that scientists have come up with for artificial intelligence, that we ask to write us something and it writes us something that sounds really, really good, but it's completely false. So there was a case 2 months ago, and this is where we can learn from the legal world. Every attorney I know is talking about this all the time. An attorney had a case around an aviation injury claim, and he was looking for cases to support his argument in court. He did some traditional searches for it. It wasn't coming up with anything perfect. So he said, I'll ask ChatGPT, pull me a bunch of cases that are going to be relevant to this claim. Pulled him 6 beautiful case studies that were perfect for his arguments. He put them into his brief, submitted it to a federal district court, and put it in front of a judge. The opposing counsel looked at it and went, this looks really good. We got to go research these. They couldn't find anything about any one of these cases, artificial intelligence had completely hallucinated and made up these entire case laws to support the argument of the initial attorney. These, obviously got them in lots of trouble. There was the potential they were going to be disbarred. They ended up getting a serious fine. But this is the type of hallucination of information that we have to start thinking about for our own workplaces as we start to ask artificial intelligence to create more of the language work, to write things for us, to bring us information where hallucinations could get us in the most trouble. And while that's a larger business issue, every individual function within a company, HR in particular, has to really think about this. So from some of these areas, what are the initial to-dos that I think that you need to start thinking about today as it comes to artificial intelligence? First is identifying and collecting data pools. Artificial intelligence becomes much, much more powerful if you have big sets of data for it to learn on, whether that's all the resumes of people that you do and don't hire, it's the performance reviews you have of everybody in a single system. These collecting data in this way is going to allow you to take advantage of these technologies as they become more accessible to us in our jobs and allow us to vault forward against our competitors that have been slower in a lot of these areas. Identify jobs for augmentation. And this is what I'm saying is not identifying jobs for replacement, but identifying the areas that might be replaced and start to think about how you're going to change those jobs into the future once somebody can take a lot less time doing their day-to-day tasks, and how the job will look so that you can save it into the future. I think that is a really core task for HR. There's nobody else in the business that's going to be doing that and protecting the workers within your company. Identifying hallucination and bias, that's something you need to start on today. Once these machines get up and running, it's really hard to slow them down. And if we don't know where to look for problems ahead of time, we can get in a lot of trouble. And then I'm just saying, dive in and get ahead. This is unlike almost any technology that's come into our lives in our working lives. This is an exponential technology. What is small growth today turns into really, really large growth 6 months, 2 years, 5 years out. And so this is work that you need to start on today to be prepared for. So with that, I wanted to just show, before I do this, I wanted to show just a little example of one of the ways that job seekers are starting to use artificial intelligence. This is from our software, our portal that we have job seekers using to find jobs in. And this is our cover letter writer supported by artificial intelligence. So I just searched up a job on Indeed. You put in the job title, company name, Chicago State University, upload your resume. It's just a random person's resume, so don't look at it too closely. And the entire job description. And this is work. We know creating customized cover letters for companies really works. When we work with job seekers over long periods of time, putting in the extra effort to make something specific to the job and company you're applying to has a great effect. And there are so many tools that job seekers have today, especially through companies like ours, that allow them to do a lot of this work very quickly. If It's not always perfect, right? Artificial intelligence can hallucinate. It's not going to get every single thing right, but a draft cover letter can be created in seconds. It used to take an hour to write one of these letters with a lot of thought and how to customize it for that individual job description, individual company. Today, so much of that legwork can be taken off the individual so they can do this for every opportunity.
Andy, I know we have a lot of questions and thoughts coming into the chat. You know, do you want to wrap
Please.
us up so that we're able to kind of engage on this really interesting topic?
Sure. Yeah, I've been going long here. Go ahead and let's do that. I only have a few more slides, so we can get some at the end if we need to, but I'd love to start taking some questions.
Absolutely, and especially regarding the use for candidates to kind of trick the system, right? So what is it from your perspective that you see as the biggest opportunity, the top opportunity right now? And please open it up for questions to those who have participated today. Thank you.
Yeah, would love to hear questions. For me, the greatest opportunity for job seekers right now, as it exists today, is this ability to do endlessly customized, specific, well-written communication for every opportunity that they have at scale. And that's something that's never existed before. It used to take so much effort. And to a hiring manager, it really indicated something. It indicated an enormous amount of interest in the role. It indicated competence in your ability to write and communicate. That is no longer a very good proxy today with a lot of this technology. Right now, I think candidates, this is their first, I was going to talk a little bit about the arms race between candidates and employers. And I think this is one of the first steps. And there's ways that's going to accelerate. Are there any questions that I could answer?
Yeah,
And Andy, I have a question. If AI is going to be generating all these letters, the assumption is it's going to be creating something not that dissimilar that the general application did for college admissions. Instead of applying to 7 schools, people are going to be apply to 25, 35, 50 schools. With job applications, my assumption is it's going to go up even more. How are the hiring managers and what are the firms going to be doing? Are they going to be employing AI to sort through? And then how are they going to, where does the human touch come in? I mean, it always was, and especially at the level that a lot of our members are at, it's about who you know and connections and people recommending people and having that big, broad network. Where does that fit into this equation now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the core points here is that for job seekers, right, that's one of the key strategies that we talk to them a lot about today is that, yeah, you can, no matter how well your resume is put together or the information that you present is put together, there's the human element in every hiring process. And while you need to convey all that information, you also need to connect with the other person and make them be somebody you want to hire and potentially spend most of your waking hours with in an office for the next 5 to 10 years. Like that element is really real. And it's something that when we're working with job seekers, a thing that we focus on a lot that people don't think about is training them to connect with the other person on the other side of the table, because that's kind of a little bit of a flaw in the hiring process in terms of, acquiring people with the pure talent that you need. But it's something that job seekers can really take advantage of. There is a way where as more technology and artificial intelligence moves into the space between employers and employees in the interaction, that it becomes more depersonalized. And some of that stuff is less effective on both sides. And there's a whole area to talk about there.
Yes, as long as it's you being used as a differentiator, right? To keep providing the guidance to people. I think that as long as people know to be human.
Yeah. And, you know, one of the things that we think about when we're looking at this is the constant arms race of technology that we're going into. Right now, candidates can create a much better profile for themselves than they ever have been able to in the past, but it doesn't indicate any skill increase. It just looks like it to the human eye. So there is a lot of discussion about AI being able to create individualized skills tests for each position, right? It can craft these in the blink of an eye. We already do this for roles in technology that require very specific skill sets, something that you hear a lot about. That could expand to every role if we needed to, from an HR side. And then there's the counter move by candidates, which is creating technology that can answer these tests perfectly. ChatGPT can already pass the bar exam. So it's really difficult to create a test that is not able to be gamed. Any other questions?
Just looking at the chat here. Do you have any insight from your candidate side of how candidates are using the technology to cover themselves? So in your example of the individual where the AI made that individual look better, right? More hireable. Are there ways that you're finding to get beyond the system in case people are using it to their own advantage and having a veneer of dishonesty in how they approach the job search process?
Yeah, I am careful to, I work with all these job candidates. To me, it's not dishonesty. It is packaging yourself in the best possible way. And it just takes an enormous amount of work. It's achievable. You could have 100 different people look at the cover letter and help you work on it to make sure it's matching the company well. This technology just does a lot of that for you. So it's not lying. It's just painting it in a way that no longer allows you from an HR perspective to get much information about whether this, the writing used to be a proxy for a lot of things like competence, ability to do this, desire for the job. That's gone away.
I think what Adina was talking about is that if you go to ChatGPT and you get the right response for this particular position, but it's not accurate about your experience, you could shape your submission so that it's not actually accurate.
Just to be seen and noticed.
I mean, you could do that anyway now.
Yeah. So like you can always lie, right? And maybe this makes it easier to lie or makes your lies
more effective,
harder to detect. But there's also lots of really above the board ways to use this technology to accurately describe what you do in the clearest possible way. And that's what I think a lot of job seekers are using today. And that's, it's good, but it does take away one of the variables that HR was able to historically rely on to start to say, take down 100 resumes to 10 that you're really going to look at. And it can add back in all the language that's going to get past an applicant tracking system based on, the job description. There is quite a bit of technology there.
Andy, Jane Lowenstein asks, how do applicants differentiate themselves when going for the same jobs if their information is created by AI? And Jane, you can add any color commentary to your question.
I'll jump in. Jane, you're welcome to add color commentary.
Not when you're on mute. I've had this conversation with groups of coaches, And it's like, if everybody's going for the same kind of job, which is often what's happening, and you have AI and AI creates this gorgeous looking material, how do I differentiate myself from the other 25 people who are applying?
Yeah, I mean, one of the tried and true techniques is hasn't changed. And it's something that we work with our candidates on a lot, which is getting a personal referral that's going to get you to the top of that pile when there's a
Mhm.
pile of
Yep.
perfect resumes that all ideally respond to that job, and it's hard to break through. Personal recommendations help a lot. We spend a lot of time with job
Yeah.
seekers, helping them think about how to get that. It could be reaching out to somebody on LinkedIn and saying, "Do you have 10 or 15 minutes of your time to tell me about your time at this company, what it's like to work there? Tell me about this potential role. And then would you introduce me to somebody else, or would you potentially
Mhm.
recommend me for that job?" Right?
Mhm.
That's the type of work for job seekers that is a really valuable use of their
Oh, yeah.
time and gets them to top of piles.
Right.
Andy, Sally is asking, how deeply do HR professionals need to understand AI,
Mm.
its technology and application? To what degree should the people on this call really begin making a study of this?
Yeah, I think you should at least begin using it. I would get onto OpenAI, start using ChatGPT, say like draft a letter to a candidate and just see what it comes up with. You can put in whatever criteria. It is something you should start getting used to, because it's going to start moving really, really quickly here. We are at the very start of it. It's exponential technology. And with technology, it's always easy to get left behind. I think this is one that's much more treacherous. It is one you need to start using today. Understanding the deep structures of artificial intelligence could be helpful, but I think it's the day-to-day use of it that's going to be valuable as a starting point.
Yeah, we have Chris Redvansky, who's recommended Gamma app, and I've used that as well. It's a very good one as well. So play around with different ones. I think that's really good. We've got Monic, MONIC.ai.
I'm not familiar with those ones specifically, but there's going to be a lot of new ones coming online here. And so I would say anyone, just try using them. There's going to be some that are better than others, but they're all like, they floor you how good they are sometimes.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh,
Andy, I'm curious. I spoke with somebody who is looking for a job, and this person was asked to go online and on video answer 3 questions. No context, text. What is the no ability to ask a question about the job, the company, blah, blah, blah. What are companies doing with that database? Like,
Yeah.
are they having the computer make decisions about who the top candidates are?
It is.
Yep.
There are companies that are starting to use that. It's actually this slide that I'm on. This is the Harvard Business Review progression of how they expect to see
Video.
automated video interviews going. Right now, we're at maybe here. We do lots of video interviews all the way to the highest level of organizations. CEOs are getting hired by video today. Automated video interviews, we are starting to see it more. It's particularly at the lower end of roles, but we're starting to see it in higher end roles where a company will ask you to submit responses to a few questions asked to you, usually by a pre-recorded actual human being, but it's a short answer. They give you a time window and you have to be precise. So it is something that you need to really practice as a performance in a way that you never really had to do. There's no element of connecting to the other person on the other side. And that is a real change. And so that's an area where job seekers are going to have to start preparing much more into the future. There are artificial intelligence technologies that can analyze that response, write a report to HR, and recommend that they come in for an in-person interview. there is a future where for certain roles, the entire process is automated and no humans ever involved.
Andy, I'm on a group that is dealing on the academic side of this issue. And one of the questions that's coming up is around exactly this kind of technology being used by organizations, and yet it is not regulated yet. And we've all heard the horror stories of people whose voice is being lifted or faces are being used for things that are not necessarily appropriate. And so I'm curious if you're seeing any kind of regulatory stand or protection for the consumer, if you will, or the end user as they're engaging in this sometimes testing elements of AI.
I mean, regulation isn't even close to catching up with how fast this technology is moving.
It's a great place for HR to think about it.
Yeah, an area where I've seen a lot of people who think about artificial intelligence talk about as a first step for regulation is making sure that artificial intelligence is not allowed to impersonate an actual human being. When you're talking to artificial intelligence, you should know it's artificial intelligence and not another person on the other side. And that's one area that a lot of people that are thinking about regulation are saying this is a necessary first step that we need to start working on today.
Other questions?
And just to throw a couple more things in there that we're doing. Interestingly, headshots are one area. You can already, like I showed that example of a headshot really going wrong earlier. There is good technology that could scrape all your Facebook photos and give you 50 perfect headshots in different outfits, with different ways you want to dress yourself up, and people are using those for the LinkedIn. And then just to get to this point of the exponential growth of this, we already internally are using artificial intelligence to program artificial intelligence. So we can architect a new tool that we want to build in artificial intelligence, and we send it over to write the code. We used to have to send it to another country where it took a month, cost us a lot of money to build that code in the first place, and then we tested it internally here. Now we have artificial intelligence write the code, and then we just test it, and what used to take a month is getting set up in a weekend. So just a point towards how quickly this is starting to move forward. Any other questions?
I have a public service announcement / question for the group who's present here. If any of you are intrigued by this conversation and want to participate in our doing a deeper dive in second quarter of next year, please reach out to me at PSPS. You can either do info@PSPS or send me an email. I'm putting my email in the chat. We are formulating our programming task force to create the second quarter programming, and the plan is to dive deeper across AI. So Andy may make a repeat appearance for us as he learns more. But we really think that this is, give us another 6 months and everything will have changed from what we've discussed today. So please raise your hands to help.
And please sign up for the other sessions. We hope will be equally as thought-provoking as the one, Andy, that you have provided today. It is something that we all need to tune into, not tune out of. So thank you. And with that, I would say we're right on time.
Everyone for having me. If you want to reach out to us,